In this podcast episode, Joe Rogan and his guest Josh Dubin delve into a diverse array of topics centered around the complexities and challenges of the criminal justice system, wrongful convictions, forensic science, the impact of systemic corruption, and the human stories behind these issues. They also explore broader societal topics, including drug legalization, the cultural and historical context of marijuana prohibition, the role of psychedelics in mental health, and discussions about contemporary events like upcoming boxing matches. Josh Dubin opens by reflecting on the unpredictability and often bizarre nature of wrongful conviction cases. Contrary to expectations that patterns would emerge, making cases more routine, he explains that each case often reveals fresh, disturbing complexities, from corruption to honest mistakes driven by confirmation bias among law enforcement. Josh highlights how these miscarriages of justice can devastate lives, emphasizing the frequent misuse of authority by corrupt officials who sometimes pursue convictions at all costs rather than seeking truth. The conversation turns to the systemic corruption that permeates parts of the criminal justice system. Josh shares examples of law enforcement officials who have knowingly framed innocent people and how difficult it is to hold them accountable due to qualified immunity protections. These corrupt acts have led to dozens of cases being overturned, yet many of the perpetrators continue to evade justice. The ongoing struggle to expose these misconducts and the challenge of obtaining clemency or pardons compound the complexity of achieving true legal fairness. Josh recounts a particularly noteworthy defamation case involving Ike and Lori Pearlmutter, wealthy philanthropists whose DNA was illicitly collected and misrepresented in legal proceedings by a neighbor obsessed with targeting them. The neighbor covertly obtained their DNA during a deposition by not touching objects they handled, then wrongly implicated Lori in sending hate mail through forensic manipulation and an unaccredited DNA lab's flawed testing. This case exposed the dangers of DNA evidence being interpreted without proper accreditation or protocols. The Pearlmutter Center for Legal Justice was founded from this ordeal, symbolizing a commitment to forensic accuracy and justice. The case culminated in a $50 million verdict against the accuser for defamation, underscoring the profound harm that baseless accusations and forensic errors can cause. Josh explains the intricacies of DNA analysis and how errors or contamination can lead to wrongful implications. He shares technical details about how one contaminated run in a DNA machine was misleadingly used by an unaccredited lab to bolster false evidence, despite the accredited lab discarding those faulty results. This illustrates how even the most reliable forensic methods, like DNA, become vulnerable when scientists or technicians are pressured, biased, or improperly supervised. He also touches on the psychological phenomenon, where forensic analysts may unintentionally bias their analysis when they are told who the suspect is beforehand. Josh narrates the harrowing case of Nelson Cruz, who was wrongfully convicted of murder in Brooklyn. Cruz was arrested despite the actual shooter, Eduardo Rodriguez, being caught at the scene with the murder weapon still smoking. Rodriguez's testimony that Cruz committed the crime was contradicted by eyewitness reports and physical evidence, but was relied upon due to corruption and the involvement of notoriously dishonest detectives such as Luis Garcella, who have a documented history of framing innocent people. Although post-conviction processes revealed lies and inconsistencies, Cruz's exoneration was delayed partly due to the judge's declining mental health, highlighting systemic failures. Cruz spent over 2 decades imprisoned for a crime he did not commit and exhibits lasting trauma. Josh expresses cautious optimism thanks to a robust conviction integrity unit led by District Attorney Eric Gonzalez, which might eventually secure Cruz's freedom. The discussion touches on a frustrating legal reality that even when the wrongly convicted are exonerated, the true offenders rarely face prosecution. Various factors, including the degradation of evidence over time, witness unavailability, and political hesitance to admit systemic failures, mean the justice system rarely attempts to correct the entirety of a wrongful conviction case. This leaves many guilty parties free, while innocent people have suffered prolonged injustice. Josh provides insight into the clemency and pardon system, describing it as a vital but frustrating last resort for many wrongfully convicted or overly sentenced individuals. He shares examples of clients who have dedicated decades to rehabilitation but face seemingly insurmountable obstacles due to rigid legal frameworks, political considerations, and inconsistent executive mercy. He recounts a particularly painful episode involving Michael Giles, a military veteran sentenced to 25 years for shooting an attacker in self-defense, whose clemency was abruptly denied by Governor DeSantis despite overwhelming support and compliance with all release conditions. This segment exposes the racial biases and political calculations that can influence decisions on clemency and pardons. Josh discusses a current case involving a longtime green card holder from Albania who, despite living a law-abiding life and contributing to society for over 50 years, faces deportation due to an old manslaughter conviction. The clash between immigration enforcement policies and considerations of justice and humanity is profound. The man's family fears the devastating impact of his removal, and efforts are underway to seek a pardon and halt deportation. This example illustrates how immigration issues often intersect with the criminal justice system, amplifying the human toll. Josh addresses the consequences of outdated and harsh drug laws, which have kept many people incarcerated for decades, despite reforms and changing attitudes. He highlights clients supported by prominent advocates like Jay-Z, who have lived exemplary lives in prison, yet remain trapped under old sentencing schemes. He speaks candidly about the hopelessness many prisoners feel and the societal reluctance to offer second chances. These issues tie into the broader criminal justice debates around reform, punishment, and redemption. The conversation acknowledges ongoing reform efforts, referencing advocacy groups such as the Reform Alliance that aim to create systems rewarding good behavior post-release and providing pathways to successful reintegration. One highlighted initiative is the Safer Supervision Act, which seeks bipartisan support to improve parole and probation supervision, emphasizing accountability and incentives. Despite these efforts, significant obstacles remain in overturning wrongful convictions and preventing further injustice. Joe and Josh traverse the history of marijuana criminalization, unpacking the role of influential industrialists like William Randolph Hearst, who suppressed hemp due to threats it posed to the paper and textile industries. They discuss how propaganda efforts, such as the Reefer Madness films, entrenched social stigma and led to decades of prohibition driven by self-interest, racism, and economic motives rather than science. The podcast exposes how marijuana was wrongly demonized despite long-standing cultural and industrial uses, including in the drafting of the Declaration of Independence. The hosts explore contrasting attitudes toward marijuana use today, considering its medical benefits, potential psychological impacts, and the challenges of legalization. They emphasize the need for informed personal choice rather than blanket prohibition, noting parallels with historically legal substances like alcohol and tobacco. The discussion covers the dangers of psychoactive drugs, addiction potential, and the importance of responsible use alongside appropriate education. Josh shares his positive experience with ketamine therapy and eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, EMDR, as transformative treatments for trauma and depression. The episode delves into the therapeutic potential of psychedelics, such as DMT via ayahuasca, and the unique biochemical properties that differentiate them from other drugs. The conversation discusses how altered states of consciousness can facilitate emotional healing, break destructive patterns, and provide profound experiences in controlled, supervised settings, while acknowledging that such approaches may not suit everyone. The podcast wrestles with the balance between regulating harmful substances and respecting individual freedom. They argue against excessive nanny-state interventions, highlighting humanity's inherent propensity for risk-taking and the importance of informed consent. The conversation touches on the social stigmas, myths, and misinformation surrounding drug use, as well as the need to destigmatize certain substances to enable open discussion and responsible behavior. Josh critiques how sensational media often distorts complex legal issues, focusing on tragedy rather than triumph. He stresses the importance of nuanced storytelling and encourages public engagement to hold officials accountable. The episode reveals the difficulty of navigating public opinion in wrongful conviction cases, and the power of grassroots activism, especially through transparency, such as sharing trial transcripts and public records to foster informed judgment. Toward the end, the discussion shifts to the upcoming high-profile boxing match between Anthony Joshua and Jake Paul. They analyze the fighters' profiles, skills, and the marketing spectacle surrounding the bout. The hosts also spotlight a notable fight featuring other rising boxing talents, emphasizing the growth and excitement within the sport. They touch on the intersection of entertainment, sports, and celebrity culture as a backdrop to broader societal discussions. Highlighting a hopeful note, they celebrate recent clemency granted to rapper Jelly Roll, sharing his remarkable weight loss and personal transformation since incarceration. This story exemplifies the power of second chances and underscores the human elements that drive the work Josh and others do. They recognize the complexity of redemption narratives and the role of public figures in advocating for reform.